Hello, my name is Antoine. Today I'll be reading from the Sarashina Diary, a remarkable window into the heart and mind of a noble woman in Heian era Japan. Let's step back 1,000 years and listen. I was brought up in a distant province which lies farther than the farthest end of the Eastern Road. I am ashamed to think that inhabitants of the royal city will think me an uncultured girl. Somehow I came to know that there are such things as romances in the world and wish to read them. When there was nothing to do by day or at night, one tale or another was told me by my elder sister or stepmother, and I heard several chapters about the shining Prince Genji. My longing for such stories increased, but how could they recite them all from memory? I became very restless and got an image of Yakushi Buddha made as large as myself. When I was alone, I washed my hands and went secretly before the altar and prayed to him with all my life, bowing my head down to the floor. Please let me go to the royal city. There I can find many tales. Let me read all of them. When 13 years old, I was taken to the royal city. On the 3rd of the long moon month, I removed from my house to Imatate, the old house where I had played as a child being broken up. At sunset, in the foggy twilight, just as I was getting into the palanquin, I thought of the Buddha before which I had gone secretly to pray. I was sorry and secretly shed tears to leave him behind. Outside of my new house, a rude temporary thatched one, there is no fence nor even shutters, but we have hung curtains and sudare. From that house, standing on a low bluff, a wide plain extends towards the south. On the east and west the sea creeps close, so it is an interesting place. When fogs are falling, it is so charming that I rise early every morning to see them. Sorry to leave this place. On the 15th, in heavy dark rain, we crossed the boundary of the province and lodged at Ikada in the province of Shimofusa. Our lodging is almost submerged. I am so afraid I cannot sleep. I see only 3 lone trees standing on a little hill in the waste. The next day was passed in drying our dripping clothes and waiting for the others to come up. On the 17th, started early in the morning and crossed a deep river. I heard that in this province there lived in olden times a chieftain of Mano. He had 1,000 and 10,000 webs of cloth woven and dipped them for bleaching in the river, which now flows over the place where his great house stood. 4 of the large gate posts remained standing in the river. Hearing the people composing poems about this place, I, in my mind, had I not seen erect in the river these solid timbers of the olden time, how could I know, how could I feel the story of that house? That evening we lodged at the beach of Kurodo. The white sand stretched far and wide, the pine wood was dark, the moon was bright, and the soft blowing of the wind made me lonely. People were pleased and composed poems. My poem: for this night only, the autumn moon at Kurodo beach shall shine for me. For this night only, I cannot sleep. Early in the morning we left this place and came to the Futoi River on the boundary between Shimofusa and Musashi. We lodged at the ferry of Matsusato near Kagami's rapids, and all night long our luggage was being carried over. My nurse had lost her husband and gave birth to her child at the boundary of the province, so we had to go up to the royal city separately. I was longing for my nurse and wanted to go to see her, and was brought there by my elder brother in his arms. We, though in a temporary lodging, covered ourselves with warm cotton batting, but my nurse, as there was no man to take care of her, was lying in a wild place and covered only with coarse matting. She was in her red dress. The moon came in, lighting up everything, and in the moonlight she looked transparent. I thought her very white and pure. She wept and caressed me, and I was loath to leave her. Even when I went with lingering heart, her image remained with me, and there was no interest in the changing scenes. The next morning we crossed the river in a ferry boat in our palanquins. The persons who had come with us thus far in their own conveyances went back from this place. We, who were going up to the royal city, stayed here for a while to follow them with our eyes, and as it was a parting for life, all wept. Even my childish heart felt sorrow. Now it is the province of Musashi. There is no charm in this place. The sand of the beaches is not white, but like mud. People say that purple grass grows in the fields of Musashi, but it is only a waste of various kinds of reeds, which grow so high that we cannot see the bows of our horsemen, who are forcing their way through the tall grass. Going through these reeds, I saw a ruined temple called Takeshibadera. There were also the foundation stones of a house with corridor. "What place is it?" I asked, and they answered, "Once upon a time there lived a reckless adventurer at Takeshiba. He was offered to the king's palace by the governor as a guard to keep the watchfire. He was once sweeping the garden in front of a princess's room and singing, 'Ah me, my weary doom to labor here in the palace. 7 good wine jars have I, and 3 in my province. There where they stand I have hung straight-stemmed gourds of the finest. They turn to the west when the east wind blows. They turn to the east when the west wind blows. They turn to the north when the south wind blows. They turn to the south when the north wind blows. And there I sit, watching them turning and turning forever. Oh my gourds, oh my wine jars.'" He was singing thus alone, but just then a princess, the king's favorite daughter, was sitting alone behind the misu. She came forward and, leaning against the doorpost, listened to the man singing. She was very interested to think how gourds were above the wine jars and how they were turning, and wanted to see them. She became very zealous for the gourds and, pushing up the blind, called the guard, saying, "Man, come here." The man heard it very respectfully and, with great reverence, drew near the balustrade. "Let me hear once more what you have been saying." And he sang again about his wine jars. "I must go and see them. I have my own reason for saying so," said the princess. He felt great awe, but he made up his mind and went down towards the eastern province. He feared that men would pursue them, and that night, placing the princess on the Seta bridge, broke a part of it away, and bounding over with the princess on his back, arrived at his native place after 7 days and 7 nights' journey. The king and queen were greatly surprised when they found the princess was lost and began to search for her. Someone said that a king's guard from the province of Musashi, carrying something of exquisite fragrance on his back, had been seen fleeing towards the east. So they sought for that guard, and he was not to be found. They said, "Doubtless this man went back home." The royal government sent messengers to pursue them, but when they got to the Seta bridge, they found it broken, and they could not go farther. In the 3rd month, however, the messengers arrived at Musashi province and sought for the man. The princess gave audience to the messengers and said, "I for some reason yearned for this man's home and bade him carry me here. So he has carried me. If this man were punished and killed, what should I do? This is a very good place to live in. It must have been settled before I was born that I should leave my trace, i.e. descendants, in this province. Go back and tell the king so. So the messenger could not refuse her and went back to tell the king about it. The king said, "It is hopeless. Though I punish the man, I cannot bring back the princess, nor is it meet to bring them back to the royal city. As long as that man of Takeshiba lives, I cannot give Musashi province to him, but I will entrust it to the princess." In this way, it happened that a palace was built there in the same style as the royal palace, and the princess was placed there. When she died, they made it into a temple called Takeshiba-dera. The descendants of the princess received the family name of Musashi. After that, the guards of the watchfire were women. We went through a waste of reeds of various kinds, forcing our way through the tall grass. There is the river Asuda along the border of Musashi and Sagami, where at the ferry Arihara Narihira had composed his famous poem. In the book of his poetical works, the river is called the River Sumida. We crossed it in a boat, and it is the province of Sagami. The mountain range called Nishitomi is like folding screens with good pictures. On the left hand we saw a very beautiful beach with long drawn curves of white waves. There was a place there called Morokoshigahara, Chinese field, where sands are wonderfully white. 2 or 3 days we journeyed along that shore. A man said, "In summer, pale and deep Japanese pinks bloom there and make the field like brocade. As it is autumn now, we cannot see them. But I saw some pinks scattered about blooming pitiably. They said, 'It is funny that Japanese pinks are blooming in the Chinese field.'" There is a mountain called Ajigara, Hakone, which extends for 10 and more miles and is covered with thick woods even to its base. We could have only an occasional glimpse of the sky. We lodged in a hut at the foot of the mountain. It was a dark, moonless night. I felt myself swallowed up and lost in the darkness when 3 singers came from somewhere. One was about 50 years old, the second 20, and the third about 14 or 15. We set them down in front of our lodging, and a karakasa, large paper umbrella, was spread for them. My servant lighted a fire so that we saw them. They said that they were the descendants of a famous singer called Kubata. They had very long hair which hung over their foreheads. Their faces were white and clean, and they seemed rather like maids serving in noblemen's families. They had clear, sweet voices, and their beautiful singing seemed to reach the heavens. All were charmed, and, taking great interest, made them come nearer. Someone said, "The singers of the western provinces are inferior to them." And at this, the singers closed their song with the words, "If we are compared with those of Naniwa, Osaka." They were pretty and neatly dressed, with voices of rare beauty, and they were wandering away into this fearful mountain. Even tears came to those eyes which followed them as far as they could be seen. And my childish heart was unwilling to leave this rude shelter frequented by these singers. Next morning, we crossed over the mountain. Words cannot express my fear in the midst of it. Clouds rolled beneath our feet. Halfway over there was an open space with a few trees. Here we saw a few leaves of Aoi, Asarum colescens. People praised it and thought strange that in this mountain, so far from the human world, was growing such a sacred plant. We met with 3 rivers in the mountain and crossed them with difficulty. That day we stopped at Sekiyama. Now we are in Suruga province. We passed a place called Iwatsubo, Rock Urn, by the barrier of Yokobashiri. There was an indescribably large square rock through a hole in which very cold water came rushing out. Mount Fuji is in this province, in the province where I was brought up, from which she begins this journey. I saw that mountain far towards the west. It towers up painted with deep blue and covered with eternal snow. It seems that it wears a dress of deep violet and a white veil over its shoulders. From the little level place of the top, smoke was going up. In the evening we even saw burning fires there. The Fuji River comes tumbling down from that mountain. A man of the province came up to us and told us a story. Once I went on an errand. It was a very hot day, and I was resting on the bank of the stream when I saw something yellow come floating down. It came to the bank of the river and stuck there. I picked it up and found it to be a scrap of yellow paper with words elegantly written on it in cinnabar. Wondering much, I read it. On the paper was a prophecy of the governors of provinces to be appointed next year. As to this province, there were written the names of 2 governors. I wondered more and more, and drying the paper kept it. When the day of the announcement came, this paper held no mistake, and the man who became the governor of this province died after 3 months, and the other succeeded him. There are such things. I think that the gods assemble there, on that mountain, to settle the affairs of each new year. At Kiyomigaseki, where we saw the sea on the left, there were many houses for the keepers of the barriers. Some of the palisades went even into the sea. At Tagonora waves were high. From there we went along by boat. We went with ease over Numajiri and came to the river Oi. Such a torrent I have never seen. Water white as if thickened with rice flour ran fast. I became ill, and now it is the province of Totomi. I had almost lost consciousness when I crossed the mountain pass of Sayo no Nakayama, the middle mountain of the Little Night. I was quite exhausted, so when we came to the bank of the Tenri River we had a temporary dwelling built, and passed several days there, and I got better. As the winter was already advanced, the wind from the river blew hard and it became intolerable. After crossing the river we went towards the bridge at Hamana. When we had gone down towards the east 4 years before, when her father had been appointed governor, there had been a log bridge, but this time we could not find even a trace of it, so we had to cross in a boat. The bridge had been laid across an inland bay. The waves of the outer sea were very high, and we could see them through the thick pine trees, which grew scattered over the sandy point, which stretched between us and the sea. They seemed to strike across the ends of the pine branches and shone like jewels. It was an interesting sight. We went forward and crossed over Inohana, an unspeakably weary ascent it was, and then came to Takashi shore of the province of Mikawa. We passed a place called 8 Bridges, but it was only a name, no bridge and no pretty sight. In the mountain of Futamura we made our camp under a big persimmon tree. The fruit fell down during the night over our camps, and people picked it up. We passed Mount Miyagi, where we saw red leaves still, although it was the first day of the 10th month. Furious mountain winds, in their passing, must spare this spot, for red maple leaves are clinging, even yet, to the branch. There was a fort of Ifaikan between Mikawa and Owari. It is amusing to think how difficult the crossing was, indeed. We passed the Narumi-sounding seashore in the province of Owari. The evening tides were coming in, and we thought if they came higher, we could not cross. So, in a panic, we ran as fast as we could. At the border of Maino we crossed a ferry called Kuromata and arrived at Nogami. Their singers came again and they sang all night. Lovingly we thought of the singers of Ashigara. Snow came, and in the storm we passed the barrier at Fuha and over the Mount Atsumi, having no heart to look at beautiful sights. In the province of Omi we stayed 4 or 5 days in a house at Okinaga. At the foot of Mitsusaka Mountain, light rain fell night and day mixed with hail. It was so melancholy that we left there and passed by Inugami, Kanzaki, and Yasu without receiving any impressions. The lake stretched far and wide, and we caught occasional glimpses of Nadeshima and Chikubushima islands. It was a very pretty sight. We had great difficulty at the bridge of Seta, for it had fallen in. We stopped at Awadzu and arrived at the royal city after dark on the 2nd day of the finishing month. When we were near the barrier I saw the face of a roughly hewn Buddha, 16 feet high, which towered over a root fence. Serene and indifferent to its surroundings, it stood unregarded in this deserted place. But I, passing by, received a message from it. Among so many provinces through which I have passed, the barriers at Kiyomigata and Osaka were far better than the others. It was dark when I arrived at the residence on the west of the Princess of Sanjo's mansion. Our garden was very wide and wild, with great, fearful trees, not inferior to those mountains I had come from. I could not feel at home or keep a settled mind. Even then I teased Mother into giving me books of stories, after which I had been yearning for so many years. Mother sent a messenger with a letter to Emon no Myoku, one of our relatives who served the Princess of Sanjo. She took interest in my strange passion and willingly sent me some excellent manuscripts in the lid of a writing box, saying that these copies had been given her by the princess. My joy knew no bounds, and I read them day and night. I soon began to wish for more, but as I was an utter stranger to the royal city, who would get them for me? My stepmother, meaning one of her father's wives, had once been a lady-in-waiting at the court, and she seemed to have been disappointed in something. She had been regretting the world, her marriage, and now she was to leave our home. She beckoned her own child, who was 5 years old, and said, "The time will never come when I shall forget you, dear heart," and pointing to a huge plum tree which grew close to the eave, said, "When it is in flower I shall come back," and she went away. I felt love and pity for her, and while I was secretly weeping, the year too went away. "When the plum tree blooms I shall come back." I pondered over these words and wondered whether it would be so. I waited and waited with my eye hung to the tree. It was all in flower, and yet no tidings from her. I became very anxious and at last broke a branch and sent it to her, of course with a poem. "You gave me words of hope, are they not long delayed? The plum tree is remembered by the spring, though it seemed dead with frost." She wrote back affectionate words with a poem. "Wait on, never forsake your hope, for when the plum tree is in flower, even the unpromised, the unexpected, will come to you." During the spring of 1022, the world was disquieted. My nurse, who had filled my heart with pity on that moonlight night at the ford of Matsuzato, died on the moon birthday of the ever-growing month, first day of March. I lamented hopelessly without any way to set my mind at ease, and even forgot my passion for romances. I passed day after day weeping bitterly, and when I first looked out of doors again, I saw the evening sun on cherry blossoms all falling in confusion. This would mean 4 weeks later. Flowers are falling, yet I may see them again. When spring returns, but oh, my longing for the dear person who has departed from us forever. I also heard that the daughter of the first advisor to the king was lost, dead. I could sympathize deeply with the sorrow of her lord, the lieutenant general, for I still felt my own sorrow. When I had first arrived at the capital, I had been given a book of the handwriting of this noble lady for my copybook. In it were written several poems, among them the following: When you see the smoke floating up the valley of Toraib Hill, then you will understand me, who seemed as shadow-like, even while living. I looked at these poems, which were written in such a beautiful handwriting, and I shed more tears. I sat brooding until Mother troubled herself to console me. She searched for romances and gave them to me, and I became consoled unconsciously. I read a few volumes of Genji Monogatari and longed for the rest, but as I was still a stranger here, I had no way of finding them. I was all impatience and yearning, and in my mind was always praying that I might read all the books of Genji Monogatari from the very first one. While my parents were shutting themselves up in Utsumasa Temple, I asked them for nothing except this romance, wishing to read it as soon as I could get it, but all in vain. I was inconsolable. One day I visited my aunt, who had recently come up from the country. She showed a tender interest in me, and lovingly said I had grown up beautifully. On my return she said, "What shall I give you? You will not be interested in serious things. I will give you what you like best." And she gave me more than 50 volumes of Genji Monogatari put in a case, as well as Ise Monogatari, Yojimi, Serikawa, Shirara, and Asautsu. How happy I was when I came home carrying these books in a bag. Until then I had only read a volume here and there, and was dissatisfied because I could not understand the story. Now I could be absorbed in these stories, taking them out one by one, shutting myself in behind the kicho. To be a queen were nothing compared to this. All day and all night, as late as I could keep my eyes open, I did nothing but look at the books, setting a lamp close beside me. Soon I learnt by heart all the names in the books, and I thought that a great thing. Once I dreamt of a holy priest in yellow Buddhist scarf, who came to me and said, "Learn the 5th book of the Hokekyo at once." I did not tell anyone about this, nor had I any mind to learn it, but continued to bathe in the romances. Although I was still ugly and undeveloped, I thought to myself, the time would come when I should be beautiful beyond compare, with long, long hair. I should be like the Lady Yukao in the romance loved by the shining Prince Genji, or like the Lady Ukifune, the wife of the General of Uji, a famous beauty. I indulged in such fancies. Shallow-minded I was indeed. Could such a man as the Shining Prince be living in this world? How could General Kaoru, literal translation, fragrance, find such a beauty as Lady Ukifune to conceal in his secret villa at Uji? Oh, I was like a crazy girl. While I had lived in the country, I had gone to the temple from time to time, but even then, I could never pray like others, with a pure heart. In those days, people learned to recite sutras and practice austerities of religious observance after the age of 17 or 18, but I could scarcely even think of such matters. The only thing that I could think of was the shining prince who would someday come to me, as noble and beautiful as in the romance. If he came only once a year, I, being hidden in a mountain villa like Lady Ukifune, would be content. I could live as heart-dwindlingly as that lady, looking at flowers or moonlit snowy landscape, occasionally receiving long-expected lovely letters from my lord. I cherished such fancies and imagined that they might be realized. On the moonbirth of the rice sprout month, I saw the white petals of the tachibana tree, a kind of orange near the house, covering the ground. Scarce had my mind received with wonder the thought of newly fallen snow. Seeing the ground lie white, when the scent of tachibana flowers arose from fallen blossoms, in our garden trees grew as thick as in the dark forest of Ashigara, and in the god's absent month its red leaves were more beautiful than those of the surrounding mountains. A visitor said, on my way thither, I passed a place where red leaves were beautiful, and I improvised. No sight can be more autumnal than that of my garden, tenanted by an autumnal person, weary of the world. I still dwelt in the romances from morning to night, and as long as I was awake. I had another dream. A man said that he was to make a brook in the garden of the Hexagon Tower to entertain the Empress of the first rank of honor. I asked the reason, and the man said, pray to the heaven-illuminating honored goddess. I did not tell anyone about this dream or even think of it again. How shallow I was. In the spring, I enjoyed the princess's garden. Cherry blossoms waited for, cherry blossoms lamented over. In spring, I loved the flowers, whether in her garden or in mine. On the moon-hidden day of the ever-growing month, March 30th, 1023, I started for a certain person's house to avoid the evil influence of the earth god. There, I saw delightful cherry blossoms still on the tree, and the day after my return I sent this poem. Alone, without tiring, I gazed at the cherry blossoms of your garden. The spring was closing. They were about to fall, always when the flowers came and went. I could think of nothing but those days when my nurse died, and sadness descended upon me, which grew deeper when I studied the handwriting of the honored daughter of the first advisor. Once in the rice sprout month, when I was up late reading a romance, I heard a cat mewing with a long drawn-out cry. I turned, wondering, and saw a very lovely cat. Whence does it come? I asked. Shh, said my sister. Do not tell anybody. It is a darling cat, and we will keep it. The cat was very sociable and lay beside us. Someone might be looking for her, we thought. So we kept her secretly. She kept herself aloof from the vulgar servants, always sitting quietly before us. She turned her face away from unclean food, never eating it. She was tenderly cared for and caressed by us. Once sister was ill, and the family was rather upset. The cat was kept in a room facing the north, i.e. a servant's room, and never was called. She cried loudly and scoldingly, yet I thought it better to keep her away and did so. Sister, suddenly awakening, said to me, "Where is the cat kept? Bring her here." I asked why, and sister said, "In my dream the cat came to my side and said, 'I am the altered form of the late honored daughter of the first advisor to the king.' There was a slight cause for this. Your sister has been thinking of me affectionately, so I am here for a while, but now I am among the servants. Oh, how dreary I am. So, saying, she wept bitterly. She appeared to be a noble and beautiful person, and then I awoke to hear the cat crying. How pitiful. The story moved me deeply, and after this I never sent the cat away to the north-facing room, but waited on her lovingly. Once when I was sitting alone, she came and sat before me, and stroking her head, I addressed her. "You are the first daughter of the noble advisor. I wish to let your father know of it." The cat watched my face and mewed, lengthening her voice. It may be my fancy, but as I was watching her, she seemed no common cat. She seemed to understand my words, and I pity her. I had heard that a certain person possessed the Chogonka, Song of the Long Regret, retold from the original of the Chinese poet Li Taipo. I longed to borrow it, but was too shy to say so. On the 7th day of the 7th month, I found a happy means to send my word, the suggestion of my wish. This is the night when, in the ancient past, the herder star embarked to meet the weaving one. In its sweet remembrance the wave rises high in the river of heaven. Even so swells my heart to see the famous book. The answer was, the star gods meet on the shore of the heavenly river. Like theirs full of ecstasy is my heart, and grave things of daily life are forgotten. On the night your message comes to me. On the 13th day of that month, the moon shone very brightly. Darkness was chased away even from every corner of the heavens. It was about midnight, and all was asleep. We were sitting on the veranda. My sister, who was gazing at the sky thoughtfully, said, "If I flew away now, leaving no trace behind, what would you think of it?" She saw that her words shocked me, and she turned the conversation lightly to other things, and we laughed. Then I heard a carriage with a runner before it stopped near the house. The man in the carriage called out, "Oginoha! Oginoha!" Reed leaf, a woman's name or pet name, twice, but no woman made reply. The man cried in vain until he was tired of it, and played his flute, a reed pipe, more and more searchingly in a very beautiful rippling melody, and at last drove away. Flute music in the night, autumn wind sighing. Why does the reed leaf make no reply? Thus I challenged my sister, and she took it up. Alas, light of heart, who could so soon give over playing? The wind did not wait for the response of the reed leaf. We sat together looking up into the firmament and went to bed after daybreak. At midnight of the Dotsia month, April 1024, a fire broke out, and the cat, which had been waited on as a daughter of the first advisor, was burned to death. She had been used to come mewing whenever I called her by the name of that lady, as if she had understood me. My father said that he would tell the matter to the first advisor, for it is a strange and heartfelt story. I was very, very sorry for her. Our new temporary shelter was far narrower than the other. I was sad, for we had a very small garden and no trees. I thought with regret of the old spacious garden, which was wild as a deep wood, and in time of flowers and red leaves the sight of it was never inferior to the surrounding mountains. In the garden of the opposite house white and red plum blossoms grew in confusion, and the perfume came on the wind and filled me with thoughts of our old home, when from the neighboring garden the perfume-laden air saturates my soul with memories. Rises the thought of the beloved plum tree, blooming under the eaves of the house which is gone. On the moonbirth of the rice sprout month, My sister died after giving birth to a child. From childhood, even a stranger's death had touched my heart deeply. This time I lamented, filled with speechless pity and sorrow. While mother and the others were with the dead, I lay with the memory awakening children, one on either side of me. The moonlight found its way through the cracks of the roof, perhaps of their temporary dwelling, and illumined the face of the baby. The sight gave my heart so deep a pang that I covered its face with my sleeve and drew the other child closer to my side, mothering the unfortunate. After some days, one of my relatives sent me a romance entitled The Prince Yearning After the Buried, with the following note. The late lady had asked me to find her this romance. At that time I thought it impossible, but now to add to my sorrow, someone has just sent it to me. I answered, what reason can there be that she strangely should seek a romance of the buried? Buried now is the seeker, deep under the mosses. My sister's nurse said that since she had lost her, she had no reason to stay, and went back to her own home weeping. Thus death or parting separates us each from the other. Why must we part? O world, too sad for me. For remembrance of her, I wanted to write about her, began a letter from her nurse. But it stopped short with the words, ink seems to have frozen up. I cannot write anymore. How shall I gather memories of my sister? The stream of letters is congealed. No comfort may be found in icicles. So I wrote, and the answer was, like the comfortless plover of the beach, in the sand printing characters soon to be washed away, unable to leave a more enduring trace in this fleeting world. That nurse went to see the grave and returned sobbing, saying, I seek her in the field, but she is not there, nor is she in the smoke of the cremation. Where is her last dwelling place? How can I find it? The lady who had been my stepmother heard of this and wrote, when we wander in search of her, ignorant of her last dwelling place, standing before the thought, tears must be our guide. The person who had sent the prince yearning after the buried wrote how she must have wandered seeking the unfindable in the unfamiliar fields of bamboo grasses, vainly weeping. Reading these poems, my brother, who had followed the funeral that night, composed a poem. Before my vision, the fire and smoke of burning arose and died again. To bamboo fields there is no more returning. Why seek there in vain? It snowed for many days, and I thought of the nun who lived on Mount Yoshino, to whom I wrote, snow has fallen, and you cannot have. Even the unusual sight of men along the precipitous path of the peak of Yoshino. On the sociable month of the next year, father was looking forward with happy expectation to the night when he might expect an appointment as governor of a province. He was disappointed, and a person who might have shared our joy wrote to me saying, I anxiously waited for the dawn with uncertain hope. The temple bell roused me from dreams, and waiting for the starlit dawn. The night, alas, was long as our 100 autumn nights. I wrote back, long was the night. The bell called from dreams in vain, for it did not toll our realized hopes. Towards the moon-hidden days, last days of the rice sprout month, I went for a certain reason to a temple at Higashiyama. On the way, the nursery beds for rice plants were filled with water, and the fields were green all over with the young growing rice. It was a smile-presenting sight. It gave a feeling of loneliness to see the dark shadow of the mountain close before me. In the lovely evenings, water rails chattered in the fields. The water rails cackle as if they were knocking at the gate, but who would be deceived into opening the door, saying, "Our friend has come along the mountain path in the dark night." As the place was near the Raizan temple, I went there to worship. Arriving so far, I was fatigued and drank from a stone-lined well beside the mountain temple, scooping the water into the hollow of my hand. My friend said, "I could never have enough of this water." "Is it the first time," I asked, "that you have tasted the satisfying sweetness of a mountain well drunk from the hollow of your hand?" She said, "It is sweeter than to drink from a shallow spring, which becomes muddy even from the drops which fall from the hand which has scooped it up." We came home from the temple in the full brightness of evening sunshine, and had a clear view of Kyoto below us. My friend, who had said that a spring becomes muddy even with drops falling into it, had to go back to the capital. I was sorry to part with her and sent word the next morning. When the evening sun descends behind the mountain peak, will you forget that it is I who gaze with longing towards the place where you are? The holy voices of the priests reciting sutras in their morning service could be heard from my house, and I opened the door. It was dim early dawn. Mist veiled the green forest, which was thicker and darker than in the time of flowers or red leaves. The sky seemed clouded this lovely morning. Cuckoos were singing on the nearby trees. Oh, for a friend, that we might see and listen together. Oh, the beautiful dawn in the mountain village. The repeated sound of cuckoos, near and far away. On that moon-hidden day, cuckoos sung clamorously on trees towards the glen. In the royal city, poets may be awaiting you, cuckoos, yet you sing here carelessly from morning till night. One who sat near me said, "Do you think that there is one person, at least, in the capital, who is listening to cuckoos and thinking of us at this moment?" And then, many in the royal city like to gaze on the calm moon. But is there one who thinks of the deep mountain, or is reminded of us hidden here? I replied, in the dead of night, moon gazing, the thought of the deep mountain affrighted, yet longings for the mountain village at all other moments filled my heart. Once, towards dawn, I heard footsteps, which seemed to be those of many persons coming down the mountain. I wondered and looked out. It was a herd of deer which came close to our dwelling. They cried out. It was not pleasant to hear them nearby. It is sweet to hear the love call of a deer to its mate in autumn nights upon the distant hills. I heard that an acquaintance had come near my residence and gone back without calling on me. So I wrote, "Even this wandering wind among the pines of the mountain, I've heard that it departs with murmuring sound. That is, you are not like it. You do not speak when going away." In the leaf-falling month, September, I saw the moon more than 20 days old. It was towards dawn. The mountainside was gloomy, and the sound of the waterfall was all I heard. I wish that lovers of nature may see the after-dawn waning moon in a mountain village at the close of an autumn night. I went back to Kyoto when, The rice fields, which had been filled with water when I came, were dried up, the rice being harvested. The young plants in their bed of water, the plants harvested, the fields dried up so long, I remained away from home. 'Twas the moon hidden of the god's absent month, when I went there again for temporary residence. The thick-grown leaves which had cast a dark shade were all fallen. The sight was heartfelt over all. The sweet, murmuring rivulet was buried under fallen leaves, and I could see only the course of it. Even water could not live on. So lonesome is the mountain of the leaf-scattering, stormy wind. At about this time the author of this diary seems to have had some family troubles. Her father received no appointment from the king. They were probably poor, and her gentle poetic nature did not incline her to seek useful friends at court. Therefore many of the best years of her youth were spent in obscurity, a great contrast to the shining prince dreams of her childhood. I went back to Kyoto saying that I should come again the next spring, could I live so long, and begged the nun to send word when the flowering time had come. It was past the 19th of the ever-growing month of the next year, 1026, but there were no tidings from her, so I wrote, "No word about the blooming cherry blossoms. Has not the spring come for you yet? Or does the perfume of flowers not reach you?" I made a journey, and passed many a moonlit night in a house beside a bamboo wood. Wind rustled its leaves, and my sleep was disturbed. Night after night the bamboo leaves sigh, my dreams are broken, and a vague, indefinite sadness fills my heart. In autumn 1026, I went to live elsewhere and sent a poem. I am like dew on the grass, and pitiable wherever I may be. But especially am I oppressed with sadness. In a field with a thin growth of reeds. After that time I was somehow restless and forgot about the romances. My mind became more sober, and I passed many years without doing any remarkable thing. I neglected religious services and temple observances. Those fantastic ideas of the romances, can they be realized in this world? If father could win some good position, I also might enter into a much nobler life. Such unreliable hopes then occupied my daily thoughts. At last father was appointed governor of a province very far in the east. Here the diary skips 6 years. The following is reminiscent. He father said, "I was always thinking that if I could win a position as governor in the neighborhood of the capital, I could take care of you to my heart's desire. I would wish to bring you down to see beautiful scenery of sea and mountain. Moreover, I wished that you could live attended beyond the possibilities of our present position. Our calmer relation from our former world must have been bad. Now I have to go to so distant a country after waiting so long. When I brought you, who were a little child, to the eastern province at his former appointment, even a slight illness caused me much trouble of mind in thinking that, should I die, you would wander helpless in that far country. There were many fears in a stranger's country, and I should have lived with an easier mind had I been alone. As I was then accompanied by all my family, I could not say or do what I wanted to say or do, and I was ashamed of it. Now you are grown up." She was 25 years old, "and I am not sure that I can live long. It is not so unusual a fate to be helpless in the capital, but the saddest thing of all would be to wander in the eastern province like any country woman. There are no relatives in the capital upon whom we could rely to foster you. Yet I cannot refuse the appointment, which has been made after such long waiting. So you must remain here, and I must depart for eternity. Oh, in what way may I provide a way for you to live in the capital decently? Night and day he lamented, saying these things, and I forgot all about flowers or maple leaves grieving sadly, but there was no help for it. He went down on the 13th of the 7th month, 1032. For several days before that I could not remain still in my own room, for I thought it difficult to see him again. On that day, the 13th, after restless hours, when the time for parting came, I had lifted the blind, and my eye met his, from which tears dropped down. Soon he had passed by. My eyes were dim with tears, and soon I concealed myself in bed. Tears were bad manners. A man who had gone to see him off returned with a poem written on a bit of pocket paper. A message from her father. If I could do as I wish, I could acknowledge more profoundly the sorrow of departing in autumn. The last line has, of course, reference to his age and the probability of never returning. I could not read the poem to the end. In the happier time I had often tried to compose halting poems, literally of broken loins, but at present I had no word to say. Never began to think in this world, even for a moment from you to part. Alas, no person came to my side, and I was very lonely and forlorn, musing and guessing where he would be at every moment. As I knew the road he was taking, the same which is described in this journal, I thought of him the more longingly and with greater heart shrinking. Morning and evening I looked towards the skyline of the eastern mountains. In the leaf-falling month I went to the temple at Udzumasa, Korinji, to pass many days. We came upon 2 men's palanquins in the road from Ichijo, which had stopped there. They must have been waiting for someone to catch up with them. When I passed by they sent an attendant with the message, "Flower, seeing go," we suppose. I thought it would be awkward not to reply to such a slight matter, and answered, "1,000 kinds." To be like them in the fields of autumn. I stayed in the temple for 7 days, but I could think of nothing but the road to the east. I prayed to the Buddha, saying, "There is no way to change the present, but grant that we may meet again peacefully after this parting." And I thought the Buddha would pity and grant my prayer. It was midwinter. It rained all day. In the night, a cloud-turning wind blew terribly and the sky cleared. The moon became exquisitely bright, and it was sad to see the tall reeds near the house broken and blown down by the wind. Dead stalks of reeds must be reminded of good autumn days. In midwinter depths, the tempest lays them low, confused and broken. Their fate is like my own, is intangibly expressed in this poem. A messenger arrived from the east, father's letter. I wandered through the province, Hitachi, now Ibaraki-ken, going into every Shinto shrine, and saw a wide field with a beautiful river running through it. There was a beautiful wood. My first thought was of you, and to make you see it, and I asked the name of that grove. The grove of longing after one's child was the answer. I thought of the one who had first named it, and was extremely sad. Alighting from my horse, I stood there for 2 hours. After leaving, like me he must have yearned, sorrowful to see, the forest of longing after one's child. To see that letter is a sadder thing than to have seen the forest. The poem sent in return presents difficulties in the way of translation, as there is a play upon words. Literally, it is something like this. The grove of longing after one's child left, Father Caressed Mountain, Chichibuzan, hard eastern way, the grove of longing after one's child. Hearing of it, I think of the Father Caressed Mountain. Towards it, hard is the eastern way. For a child left here alone. Thus I passed days in doing nothing, and I began to think of going to temples, making pilgrimages. Mother was a person of extremely antiquated mind. She said, "Oh, dreadful is the Hatsuse temple. What should you do if you were caught by someone at the Nara ascent? Ishiyama too, Sekiyama Pass, near Lake Biwa, is very dreadful. Kurama-san, the famous mountain. Oh, dreadful to bring you there. You may go there when father comes back." As mother says so, I can go only to Kiyomizu temple. My old habits of romantic indulgence were not dead yet, and I could not fix my mind on religious thoughts as I ought. In the equinoctial week, there was a great tumult of festival, so great a noise that I was even afraid of it. And when I lay asleep, I dreamt there was a priest within the enclosure before the altar, in blue garments, with loose brocade hood and then brocade shoes. He seemed to be the intendant of the temple. "You, being occupied with vain thoughts, are not praying for happiness in the world to come," he said indignantly, and went behind the curtain. I awoke startled, yet neither told anyone what I had dreamt, nor thought about it much. My mother had 2 1-foot in diameter bronze mirrors cast, and made a priest take them for us to the Hatsuse temple. Mother told the priest to pass 2 or 3 days in the temple, especially praying that a dream might be vouchsafed about the future state of this woman, the daughter. For that period I was made to observe religious purity, i.e., abstain from animal food. The priest came back to tell the following. I was reluctant to return without having even a dream, and after bowing many times and performing other ceremonies, I went to sleep. There came out from behind the curtain a gracious holy lady in beautiful garments. She, taking up the offered mirrors, asked me if no letters were affixed to these mirrors. I answered in the most respectful manner. There were no letters. I was told only to offer these. "Strange," she said, "letters are to be added. See what is mirrored in one. It creates pity to look at it." I saw her weep bitterly and saw appear in the mirror shadows of people rolling over in lamentation. To see these shadows makes one sad, but to see this makes one happy. And she held up the other mirror. There the misu was fresh green, and many-colored garments were revealed below the lower edge of it. Plum and cherry blossoms were in flower. Nightingales were singing from tree to tree. I did not even listen to his story nor question him as to how things seemed in his dream. Someone said, "Pray to the heavenly illuminating honored goddess," and my irreverent mind thought, where is she? Is she a goddess or a Buddha? At first I said so, but afterwards grew more discreet, and asked someone about her, who replied, "She is a goddess, and takes up her abode at Ise. The goddess is also worshipped by the provincial governor of Ki. She is worshipped at the ancestor shrine in the imperial court. I could not by any means get to Ise. How could I bow before the imperial shrine? I could never be allowed to go there. The idea flowed through my mind to pray for the heavenly light. A relative of mine became a nun and entered the Sugaku temple. in winter, I sent her a poem. Even tears arise for your sake. When I think of the mountain hamlet where snowstorms will be raging, reply, I seem to have a glimpse of you, coming to me through the dark wood when close overhead is summer's growth of leaves. 1036. Father, who had gone down towards the east, came back at last. He settled down at Nishiyama, and we all went there. We were very happy. One moonbright night we talked all the night through. Such nights as this exist. As if it were for eternity I parted from you. How sad was that autumn. At this father shed tears of happiness abundantly and answered me with a poem. That life grows dear and is lived with rejoicing, which once was born with hate and lamentation. My joy knew no bounds when my waiting was at an end after the supposed parting for eternity. Yet my father said, "It is ridiculous to lead a worldly life when one is very old. I used to feel so when I saw old men. But now it is my turn to be old, so I will retire from social life." As he said it with no lingering affection for this world, I felt quite alone. Towards the east the field stretched far and wide, and I could see clearly from Mount Hiye to Mount Inari. Towards the west the pines of the forest of Narabigoka were sounding in my ear, and up to the tableland on which our house stood the rice fields were cultivated in terraces, while from them came the sound of the bird-scaring clappers, giving me a homely country sentiment. One moonlight evening, I had a message from an old acquaintance who had had an opportunity to send to me, and this I sent back. None calls upon me, or remembers me in my mountain village. On the reeds by the thin hedge, the autumn winds are sighing. 1037. In the 10th month we changed our abode to the capital. Mother had become a nun and, although she lived in the same house, shut herself up in a separate chamber. Father rather treated me as an independent woman than as his child. I felt helpless to see him shunning all society and living hidden in the shade. A person, the Princess Yuko, daughter of the Emperor Toshiaku, who had heard about me through a distant relative, called me to her, saying it would be better to be with her than passing idle, lonely days. My old-fashioned parents thought the court life would be very unpleasant and wanted me to pass my time at home, but others said, "People nowadays go out as ladies-in-waiting at the court, and then fortunate opportunities for marriage are naturally numerous. Why not try it?" So at the age of 26, I was sent to the court against my will. I went for one night the first time. I was dressed in an 8-fold uchiki of deep and pale chrysanthemum colors, and over it I wore the outer flowing robe of deep red silk. As I have said before, my mind was absorbed in romances, and I had no important relatives from whom I could learn distinguished manners or court customs, so except from the romances I could not know them. I had always been in the shadow of the antiquated parents, and had been accustomed not to go out, but to see moon and flowers. So when I left home I felt as if I were not I, nor was it the real world to which I was going. I started in the early morning. I had often fancied in my countrified mind that I should hear more interesting things for my heart's consolation than were to be found living fixed in my parents' house. I felt awkward in court in everything I did, and I thought it sad, but there was no use in complaining. I remembered with grief My nieces who had lost their mother and had been cared for by me alone, even sleeping at night one on either side of me. Days were spent in musing with a vacant mind. I felt as if someone were always spying upon me and I was embarrassed. After 10 days or so, I got leave to go out. Father and mother were waiting for me with a comfortable fire in a brazier. Seeing me getting out of my palanquin, my nieces said, "When you were with us, people came to see us, but now no one's voice is heard. No one's shadow falls before the house. We are very low-spirited. What can you do for us who must pass days like this?" It was pitiful to see them cry when they said it. The next morning they sat before me saying, "As you are here, many persons are coming and going. It seems livelier." Tears came to my eyes to think what virtue, literally fragrance, I could have that my little nieces made so much of me. It would be very difficult, even for a saint, to dream of his prenatal life. Yet when I was before the altar of the Kiyomizu temple, in a faintly dreamy state of mind which was neither sleeping nor waking, I saw a man who seemed to be the head of the temple. He came out and said to me, "You were once a priest of this temple, and you were born into a better state by virtue of the many Buddhist images which you carved as a Buddhist artist. The Buddha, 17 feet high, which is enthroned in the eastern side of the temple, was your work. When you were in the act of covering it with gold foil, you died." "Oh, undeservedly blessed," I said, "I will finish it then." The priest replied, "As you died, another man covered it and performed the ceremony of offerings." I came to myself and thought, if I serve with all my heart the Buddha of the Kiyomizu temple, by virtue of my prayers in this temple in the previous life. In the finishing month, I went again to the court. A room was assigned for my use. I went to the princess's apartment every night and lay down among unknown persons, so I could not sleep at all. I was bashful and timid and wept in secret. In the morning I retired while it was still dark and passed the days in longing for home, where my old and weak parents, making much of me, relied upon me as if I were worthy of it. I yearned for them and felt very lonely. Unfortunate, deplorable, and helpless mind. That was graven into my thought, and although I had to perform my duty faithfully, I could not always wait upon the princess. She seemed not to guess what was in my heart, and attributing it only to shyness favored me by summoning me often from among the other ladies. She used to say, "Call the younger ladies," and I was dragged out in spite of myself. Those who were familiar with the court life seemed to be at home there, but I, who was not very young yet, did not wish to be counted among the elderly, was rather neglected and made to usher guests. However, I did not expect too much of court life and had no envy for those who were more graceful than I. This, on the contrary, set me at ease, and I, from time to time, presented myself before the princess and talked only with congenial friends about lovely things. Even on smile-presenting, interesting occasions, I shrank from intruding and becoming too popular, and did not go far into most things. Sleeping one night before the princess, I was awakened by cries and fluttering noises from the waterfowl in the pond. Like us, the water jowl pass all the night in floating sleep. They seem to be weary, with shaking away the frost from their feathers. My companions passed their leisure time in talking over romances with the door open which separated our rooms, and they often called back one who had gone to the princess's apartment. She sent word once, "I will go if I must." intending to give herself the pleasure of coming. The long leaves of the reed are easily bent, so I will not forcibly persuade it, but leave it to the wind. In this way, composing poems, we passed the hours talking idly. Afterwards this lady separated from the court and left us. She remembered that night and sent me word. That moonless, flowerless winter night, it penetrates my thought and makes me dwell on it. I wonder why. It touched my heart, for I also was thinking of that night. In my dreams the tears of that cold night are still frozen. But these I weep away secretly. The princess still called my stepmother by the name of Kazusa, governor's lady. Father was displeased that that name was still used after she had become another man's wife, and he made me write to her about it, the name of Asakura in a far-off country. The court now hears it in a divine dance song. My name also is still somewhere heard, but not honorably. One very bright night, after the full moon, I attended the princess to the imperial palace. I remembered that the heaven-illuminating goddess was enthroned within, and wanted to take an opportunity to kneel before the altar. One moon-bright night, 1042 A.D., I went in to the shrine privately, for I know Lady Hakase who was taking care of this shrine. The perpetual lights before the altar burned dimly. She, the Lady Hakase, grew wondrously old and holy. She seems not like a mortal, but like a divine incarnation. Yet she spoke very gracefully. The moon was very bright on the following night, and the princess's ladies passed the time in talking and moon-gazing, opening the doors, outer shutters of the Fujitsubo. The footsteps of the royal consort of Umetsubo going up to the king's apartment were so exquisitely graceful as to excite envy. Had the late queen been living, she could not walk so grandly, someone said. I composed this poem. She is like the moon, who, opening the gate of heaven, goes up over the clouds. We, being in the same heavenly palace, pass the night. In remembering the footfalls of the past, the ladies who are charged with the duty of introducing the court nobles seem to have been fixed upon, and nobody notices whether simple-hearted country women, like me, exist or not. On a very dark night in the beginning of the god's absent month, when sweet-voiced reciters were to read sutras throughout the night, another lady and I went out towards the entrance door of the audience room to listen to it, and after talking fell asleep, listening, leaning, when I noticed a gentleman had come to be received in audience by the princess. It is awkward to run away to our apartment to escape him. We will remain here. Let it be as it will. So said my companion, and I sat beside her listening. He spoke gently and quietly. There was nothing about him to be regretted. Who is the other lady? He asked of my friend. He said nothing rude or amorous like other men, but talked delicately of the sad, sweet things of the world, and many a phrase of his, with a strange power, enticed me into conversation. He wondered that there should have been in the court one who was a stranger to him, and did not seem inclined to go away soon. There was no starlight, and a gentle shower fell in the darkness. How lovely was its sound on the leaves. The more deeply beautiful is the night, he said. The full moonlight would be too dazzling. Discoursing about the beauties of spring and autumn, he continued, although every hour has its charm, pretty is the spring haze. Then the sky being tranquil and overcast, the face of the moon is not too bright. It seems to be floating on a distant river. At such a time the calm spring melody of the lute is exquisite. In autumn, on the other hand, the moon is very bright. Though there are mists trailing over the horizon, we can see things as clearly as if they were at hand. The sound of wind, the voices of insects, all sweet things seem to melt together. When, at such a time, we listen to the autumnal music of the koto, we forget the spring. We think that is best. But the winter sky, frozen, all over magnificently cold, the snow covering the earth and its lights mingling with the moonshine. Then the notes of the hichiriki vibrate on the air and we forget spring and autumn. And he asked us, which captivates your fancy? On which stays your mind? My companion answered in favor of autumn, and I, not being willing to imitate her, said, pale green night and flowers all melting into one, in the soft haze, everywhere the moon glimmering in the spring night. So I replied, and he, after repeating my poem to himself over and over, said, then you give up autumn? After this, as long as I live, such a spring night shall be for me a memento of your personality. The person who favored autumn said, others seem to give their hearts to spring, and I shall be alone gazing at the autumn moon. He was deeply interested, and being uncertain in thought said, even the poets of the Tang Empire could not decide which to praise most, spring or autumn. Your decisions make me think that there must be some personal reasons when our inclination is touched or charmed. Our souls are imbued with the colors of the sky, moon, or flowers of that moment. I desire much to know how you came to know the charms of spring and autumn. The moon of a winter night is given as an instance of dreariness, and as it is very cold, I had never seen it intentionally. When I went down to Ise to be present as the messenger of the king at the ceremony of installing the Virgin in charge of the shrine, I wanted to come back in the early dawn, so went to take leave of the princess, whose installation had just taken place, in a moonbright night after many days' snow, half shrinking to think of my journey. Her residence was an otherworldly place, awful even to the imagination, but she called me into an adequate apartment. There were Persians in that room who had come down in the reign of the Emperor Enyu. Their aspect was very holy, ancient, and mystical. They told of the things of long ago with tears. They brought out a well-tuned four-stringed lute. The music did not seem to be anything happening in this world. I regretted that day should even dawn, and was touched so deeply that I had almost forgotten about returning to the capital. Ever since then, the snowy nights of winter recall that scene, and I without fail gaze at the moon even though hugging the fire. You will surely understand me, and hereafter every dark night with gentle rain will touch my heart. I feel this has not been inferior to the snowy night at the palace of the Ise Virgin. With these words he departed, and I thought he could not have known who I was. In the 8th month of the next year, 1043, we went again to the imperial palace, and there was in the court an entertainment throughout the night. I did not know that he was present at it, and I passed that night in my own room. When I looked out in early morning, opening the sliding doors on the corridor, I saw the morning moon very faint and beautiful. I heard footsteps, and people approached, some reciting sutras. One of them came to the entrance and addressed me. I replied, and he, suddenly remembering, exclaimed, That night of softly falling rain I do not forget even for a moment. I yearn for it. As chance did not permit me many words, I said, "What intensity of memory clings to your heart?" That gentle shower fell on the leaves. Only for a moment our hearts touched. I had scarcely said so when people came up and I stole back without his answer. That evening, after I had gone to my room, my companion came in to tell me that he had replied to my poem. If there be such a tranquil night as that of the rain, I should like in some way to make you listen to my lute, playing all the songs I can remember. I wanted to hear it, and waited for the fit occasion, but there was none, ever. In the next year, one tranquil evening, I heard that he had come into the princess's palace, so I crept out of my chamber with my companion, but there were many people waiting within and without the palace, and I turned back. He must have been of the same mind with me. He had come because it was so still a night, and he returned because it was noisy. I yearn for a tranquil moment, to be out upon the sea of harmony, in that enchanted boat. Oh, boatman, do you know my heart? So I composed that poem, and there is nothing more to tell. His personality was very excellent, and he was not an ordinary man, but time passed, and neither called to the other.